Hey guys, feels good to be back. So what we're going to be doing today is going over the patch notes for 10.4. Now, I haven't looked at the new card releases at all so far, so I'm going in blind. I want to look at the patch notes first to see maybe when we're looking at the new cards, how there might be some synergy there. But in this video, we're going to talk about everything you should know going into the new patch. So we'll get to it here. And I got this page loaded up. So we got Year of the Curse scroll joining in the celebrations with the 21 brand new cards. So we're looking at 21 cards. I had a feeling that would be the case. This time around, they made it so that you had to apply to get a card reveal versus just like entering a draw, more or less. And I have pretty much every server except for my own muted on Discord because, you know, I'm always working on something or another. So I didn't see the application, you know, until it was overdue. So hopefully one of these days I can get that done and be able to get a card reveal. I think that would be really cool. But for now, we'll just look at this stuff later on. But so we got 10.4 coming up here. New reward page book. That's good because I have like 500 keys I want to spend. New info screen. Okay. Starter decks can no longer be removed or modified. I hope that they don't bring them back in my deck builder because I make a lot of decks and having the extra spots is kind of nice, not having 6 random or 5 random decks if they don't include Syndicate. Will be re-added. No! Okay, I guess that's just something I have to deal with. The starter decks are really bad in this game though. So we can look at the season transition flow for more information regarding MMR. You'll need to click more info when the screen pops up. Okay, sure. So All God provision changed from 10 to 9. Let's go over the neutrals here. Something, you know, more important than this little fine-tuning stuff. We have All God going from 10 to 9. The problem with All God was when he first came out, he was playable because back then there weren't always super busted cards. But now he doesn't seem playable at all, and that's because 10 provision slot, you're giving 3 units a boost by 2 that are in your deck, right? I'll pull it up here so you could see. But, so it's this one. Boost 3 units in your deck by 2, right? It has 4 base power, so it's playing essentially 10 for 10, and that's if you can thin out those cards. Bringing it down to 9 might actually make them playable again. I don't know if it's going to be a great play to have. I still think that there's going to be much better plays in around 9 provision that are going to change the course of the game, but this is something interesting, I guess. Maybe that it works with some sort of carryover deck, right, that you could think of. I don't know if it's really going to be that significant, though. Going into verification, so with this one here, provision changed from 6 to 5. I actually didn't think it was a bad card at 6 provision, but I didn't think it was one of those ones that I wanted to play because oftentimes it wasn't tutorable being a spell, right? A lot of factions specifically have their own things they tutor, like, for example, monsters will have your organic cards, you know, Scoia'tael's going to have nature cards, things like that, right? Now, a gold tutor is hard to find, so you want to draw this card. But transform an artifact into an Elder Bear if it's on your side of the playing field, boost it by 4. So again, it's generally just playing off like a Megascope or scenario, and it's playing 10 points for 6 provision. The fact that it's going to be 10 for 5 might make it worth playing in a lot of decks where you're either running a scenario, you're running Megascopes, or you're running some kind of location, right? And I don't mind that there. 10 for 5 is a good trade. Now, it's kind of tall, right? But it would be a decent finishing move or something to bleed your opponent and not have to spend a lot there. So look out for verification. I think that one's going to be pretty good, but it's not like overtuned by any means because it's just a point slam. However, it is a way to obviously deal with scenarios too. So it's sort of like a pseudo heat wave. If you don't want to spend heat wave on a scenario, you could just give them bear, but I don't love it either. But in some cases where 6 points on their side is better than maybe 20, 30 points from a scenario, then by all means go ahead. I think Geddoneth it would be a good trade. I think in some cases Mushy Truffle would be a good trade, right? Masquerade Ball would be a pretty good trade, but some of the other ones, I don't know. You know what I mean? But that's that. So Siri provision cost changed from 10 to 9. I wonder which series. I just have to look at the provisions for the series. It's just this regular series. So damage 3 enemy units by 1. Whenever you lose a round, return this unit to your hand. They bring it down to 9 provision. I still don't think it's going to see a lot of play. And the reason why is because it's really easy to remove something with 4 power, right? So what you're getting out of this card is 4 on your side of the board. You're getting 3 damage, essentially. And then, you know, someone's going to remove this so that you can't get it back. So there's going to have to be a lot of measures in place to make sure that you keep this going, right? And I don't think you want to start pumping boosts into it necessarily. You know, it's probably better just to have Siri Dash for that reason, because it actually acts in the same round, so it's worth taking care of. But again, I think some people will try to play Siri. I don't think it's going to be something that I'm going for right away, just based on what I see right here. Iris Shade provision cost changed from 9 to 7. So if you guys aren't familiar with Iris Shade, this card here, remove a unit's armor and boost self by that amount. So there were a lot of talks about how do we fit this into like an Onslaught deck where we have like 20 armor and there's nothing to do with it, right? This is a really good card in there to strip the armor off something and boost self by the same amount. Now, I had another idea that I play tested a couple months ago. If you guys remember this one, I was playing Dwarves, and I said, okay, well, what if we put Iris Shade in a Dwarves deck, right? And the conclusion was that Yarpen was just better, because Yarpen was 9 provisions, and it would be one or the other, basically. Now, with Iris Shade being 7 provisions, and from what I've been told, Dwarfs are getting tons of buffs, this might actually have really good synergies within that matchup, or it might actually be a tech for that matchup, right? So if they're pounding something with like 10 armor, for example, you could have one of these in your deck if you're running into that every second game to counter it. But more than often, I think this could just be squeezed in the deck itself. So really cool. Lady of the Lake, power changed from 7 to 3, provisions changed from 7 to 8, ability change to play an echo card from your deck. So if you guys remember Lady of the Lake before, right? It was basically just 7 power, 7 provision, give an allied unit a shield, done. Now she's a universal tutor with 3 base power, kind of like a fur cart. Play an echo card from deck. So if you're playing, I'm trying to think of which faction would really benefit from this. So you have Menno when it comes to Nilfgaard, but you also have Furcart, and I often choose Furcart at 7 provision because it has added synergies. In monsters, it's not a bad idea, but then it takes it away from devotion, so it wouldn't really work in Frost, unless you're doing like a non-dev Frost. In Skellige, you could do that for like a Blood Eagle, but then the problem is, you know, Skellige warriors up until this point have really benefited from that devotion, so it wouldn't really fit there. I think that this is going to get some more play than not in like a Northern Realms deck. It doesn't say if it lost the shield. It doesn't say it, so I'm not sure. Maybe it has a shield, maybe it doesn't, but if it has a shield, this would play pretty well in Shield Wall. 3 base power plus shield, per play an echo card, get amphibious. I don't really run devotion as much anymore with Northern Realms, so I kind of like it in that situation there. If you guys have any suggestions on where you think this card would be good, let me know in the comments below, but I'm thinking Northern Realms looks pretty good. This could see some play in Scoia'tael as well, right? You think it would be a Dryad. But anyways, so yeah, I mean, Scoia'tael for like their nature card, you know what I mean? Their echo. That's cool. Provision from Morale changed. So first time I ever got to pro rank, guys, I had Morale in my deck. Oh, they don't like the space. So this one here. So poison an enemy unit, order on melee, poison an enemy unit. So this card itself does 1 complete poison kill over 2 turns. The reason why people stopped playing this card is because it wasn't getting its value due to the fact that it was 5 power, easy to remove or lock. It's basically it, right? A lot of control going on in the meta right now. For 9 provision, I don't think it's going to change a lot, right? This will most likely be played most frequently in either your Syndicate or your Nilfgaard, and they just have so many ways to do about the same thing. But I do like the agent tag. There is some synergy there with Nilfgaard, so maybe we'll start to see this type of thing come back more. We have Philip that's been changed like a little bit over the last patch, so maybe this will help add the statuses we need, and at 9 provision you don't feel as bad playing it, so I could see Moral being fit in some decks here. Vesemir Mentor, provision change from 10 to 9, so this tells me that they're looking to encourage the play of Witcher decks a little bit more, you know, whether it be Scoia'tael Witchers with like the movement package, or whether it be Skellige Witchers with Arnagod, or whether it be the Northern Realms Witchers, right? This is going to be boosting all Witchers we control by 1, so we want to swarm out and boost them all, and then Adrenaline 4, boost all Witchers in your hand and deck by 1. So that's kind of the idea. Bringing this to 9 provisions is really good. Like, I thought it was worth playing at 10 if you make the deck for it, but now it allows us to put maybe something that we couldn't fit before, like that extra lock or tech card, or that heat wave, and we can upgrade something that was a 9 to a 10, you know, if we had a duel or something like that in the Northern Realms. So I think that's pretty cool, right? Saving the provisions, making it make a bit more sense. I don't think that this is going to be game breaking. I think that it's going to just encourage a bit more variety within the game. Watchman, I mean, this card must suck because I can't recall what it is by reading the name. This one. So give an adjacent unit that shields what it has. Give an allied unit a shield. Still bad. It's, yeah. I still don't think it's good. It's still on order, too. So they give it a shield, which helps keep it there, fine. But, you know, you use one thing to ping down the shield, and then you take it out if there's going to be something that they're looking to give a shield to protect, right? So, I don't know how much I love that, especially in at 5 provisions. There's a lot more you can do than give something a shield. Now, let's move on to monsters. You guys love when I post Qcento decks. It's been a while since I've done one, but there's a good reason for it. It just wasn't that strong. I tried to make it work. It wasn't doing it. Kashi just felt better. Now there's a bit more of a reason to play Qcento Queen with the provision adjustment, or buff rather, to 9. So you might see maybe the opportunity to try this again, right? But you know how it is. When swarm decks take off, then all the wide control takes off. That's when you're going to see the lacerates, the tin boys, the girds, like all that type of stuff. The crushing traps. So I think that you're going to see this card being played a lot in the first week of the patch, because people are going to be excited about the provision. But I think that after the time, then it's probably going to go a little bit in the back burner, right? It's not going to be like a tier 1 play, in my opinion. But it's good to see something like this. Maybe it encourages Arrakis Swarm again, and maybe it's like a good complementary play to either Arrakis Swarm or just like Point Slam, right? So pretty cool. Red Riders brought back the option to spawn enemy row for 4 turns. Has 3 choices instead of 2. Yeah, so they recently touched on Red Riders in the last patch, right? They made it have 2 choices like this. What they're saying is they're just bringing back the choice that used to be there that they took away before. And I think that's actually better, because sometimes you'll play Red Riders, but you don't want to replay a bronze because it's not really going to do much for you. So getting the extra 2 turns of Frost is much better. So I think that's fair. I think what happened was Monsters Frost was played a lot at the beginning of the last patch, and then people just kind of stopped playing it. So, or not playing it as much. It didn't take off in the way that I think devs expected it would. So this is like a little bit more support for it, right? Ritual Sacrifice, that's an organic card. It's the spaces. So trigger all allied units' Death Wish abilities. So what's really cool about this card is that, well, it reminds me of Collusion if you're thinking Syndicate, because it's going to trigger like a whole chain reaction of events once you have a board state set up. But oftentimes when there's a specific thing that you have on the board that you want to like trigger the Death Wish of, you're probably going to do it right away, right? It doesn't work with Vi or Detlef. It'll work mainly with like your other stuff, like your Marunas, your Manicores, like your Rot Fiends, you know, all that type of stuff. So this is not bad though. If you can get that stuff out there, a couple Harpy Eggs and all that, you can just slam this down and have it go. Now, provision change from 10 to 8 is a lot more of a reason to play it. Right, that's 2 whole provisions, so this could play for a ton of points. Let's say, for example, that we have 2 Harpy Eggs we play from hand. And then we have... how do we go about it? Like, a couple Harpy Eggs we play from hand. Maybe we have... I was going to say, like, Mushy Truffle with, like, the Selenio Harpies, and we somehow make a third, right, off a Detlef or whatever, and then we just play this card. So 8 provision, and then we get basically, you know, the 6 times 3 is the 18 points from just proccing a bunch of bronze cards. Like, that's just an easy example to achieve. Again, if you're floating like Maruna and all this type of stuff and hoping that it sticks there, you can have a much better swing. But that's pretty cool. Ruin is nice. I think Ruin used to be played a lot more before there became a more cost-effective alternative, right? With Succubus coming out and the condition not that hard to create, especially with location being available, it just felt like Ruin wasn't in as many decks because the Succubus is 5 base power, they're 5 provision, and it does the same thing with Adrenaline, right? So this now being at 9 provision might see more play. This, in theory, would be, you know, 4 points per turn, right? If this did become a problem, you'd just see a lot more graveyard punish. Actually, it wouldn't work that way. Yeah, it would. We lock it, we kill it, we graveyard punish it. Yeah, so I mean, that's certainly a way, right? It wouldn't be that hard. It would be a little bit of effort, though, and I think that effort makes it worth playing. But, again, you're going to have a lot of consumes in your deck in order to make it work. We're talking like K-Ren, we want to have like a couple Bargists, maybe Barragazis to really get the max benefit from this card. But that's a good change. It's a step in the right direction. I like to support the Death Wish. I think it's fair. Hjalmar on crate's really cool. I just finished doing the Beginner to Pro series, if you haven't seen it. I had Hjalmar in my deck about 70% of the way from new account to pro. I love the card. It basically banishes a unit in our graveyard and damages an enemy by its power. Oftentimes you'll use Greatsword for like a 10-point removal. It got a little bit expensive because there were a lot of other really good cards you'd want to include in that 10 provision slot. Morkvarg was really good in a lot of Skellige decks. You had King Bran now at 11, which sort of pushed the place of Hjalmar out because you definitely want to have King Bran in a lot of warrior or pirate decks, right? So this going down to 9 helps it fit back into that type of deck. Of course, Turgvi's in around the 10 provision too, which I often choose over Hjalmar. So I'm excited about this. I love this card. It does require some setup, so it's not cheap, right? You do have to put something with tall base power in your deck and have it that way in order to make this work. Otherwise, this card's kind of sad. But 9 provision is a lot less risk. Let's say if we only have a 5 or 6 in our graveyard power-wise, you know, we're getting 5 or 6 removal plus the 3 for the 9. It seems okay. It doesn't seem like it's game-breaking. Now, Stunning Blow just got reverted back to the way it used to be. If you guys are new to the game, you might not know this, but maybe sometime about a year and a half ago, Stunning Blow basically did 7 damage if the target had armor. That's huge, right? Everyone was running Stunning Blows. They were running 2 of them, and they were running 2 Gunning Slashes, and you know, you'd always get beat by Stunning Blow. You'd put down like a Dunka equivalent or whatever the case, you get Stunning Blow on that like every time. If you boost it up even, it's not safe. So with Stunning Blow making a huge return, I could see it being kind of scary, right? Northern Realms, let's have a look at the next faction here. We got Vernon Roach. I'm putting them all in just so you guys know what I'm talking about when I mention the cards. So this is Disloyal. So when you play this card, it goes on the opponent's side of the playing field, and it's going to allow us to play the top 2 cards from our deck. For me, that's not very consistent. It's a little bit scary to play something like that, right? But at 9 provision, I might want to play it in round 3 maybe. Because if you're pulling 2 cards in deck round 3, chances are those are 2 cards that you want to play. And it's a tutor that plays 2 cards. I mean, that's just a really big swing. You're adding 2 cards to the game for 9 provision. If there's a way for you to manipulate that, maybe with Centurion Envoy or something like that, then that could be quite scary, right? Centurion Envoy put to the top, boom, play this. You know, you're getting at least 1 powerhouse card, and all you have to do is give them 3 points. That's actually pretty cool, and maybe we'll actually see that being played more. Now, Queen Meave is something that never took off. I don't know if it's going to take off, just because of the card design, right? It's not so much the provision cost. I think it would have been... I somehow remember this costing more and it getting buffed to 10, and now they're buffing it to 9. I thought it was 11 when it came out. But Inspired, at the end of your turn, lower the counter by 1, counter 3. When the counter reaches 0, boost all allied units by 1 or reset the counter. Whenever this unit receives a boost, gain 1 armor. So the problem is, we need something to directly inspire it, like with a point or 2, right? And then the opponent's going to try and either lock it or remove it or heatwave it. And they've got 3 turns to do it. So that's the problem with the card, right? You have to have a defender or something to keep it, or you have to have a purify. And we know that if you're playing Devotion, Northern Realms has horrible purify options, right? Kudu deck's very expensive. So you'd probably do this in like a non-Devotion, maybe have a Peller handy. Again, Donimir of Troy to help defend this. And you have to obviously work on getting a Swarm on the board too, and make sure you keep this inspired. So it's ambitious, but for 9 provision, I think everything's worth a try once, right? We're starting to see a little bit of love to these cards that are just neglected, but people want to play, and I think that's a good direction for the game. Our 2 is a student. Patience is now only active on the range row, and the Banard student, Patience is only active on the melee row. I don't think I have to show you guys these cards. You guys know. Meditating Mages, the ones that count up and then cause like havoc later on in the game, they only work on the correct row. Well, I'll show you one of them just so you know. They're both basically the same card with a different row lock, and this one's... Wait, what? There we go. So this is the range one. You can only play it on its row, and then the other one. So the problem is people were playing this besides Rafford's Vengeance to get the damage off the Rafford's Vengeance, and they weren't even playing it on the right row, and it was still getting the patience values that they wouldn't have used anyways, right? So this is basically saying, you know what, if you're going to play like that, then you don't get to use, you don't get to accumulate the order, so you have to choose. Do you want your 2 damage, or do you want to play the card as it was intended? And that's basically the case. So I think that's adjustment that needed to be in place a long time ago. Now, there's actually quite a few... Wow. Let's go back into Scoia'tael now. You guys know I have more Scoia'tael wins than any other faction. So what they're saying about Barclay is ability change to deploy, give each allied dwarf 1 armor. If they already had 1 armor, boost them by 1 instead. You notice how it says each, not on a row. So this is going to be the whole board state. Now, let's say you're swarming pretty hard, right? You've got the first row full, you've got the second row half full. The fact that you're able to basically boost everything by 1 potentially is scary. And the fact that you can basically replate everything if they use a wide punish to like disrupt the Brewer play is pretty scary in around 6 provisions. This card wasn't being played because there was a 4 provision bronze that did the same thing, right? Boost the unit by the number of dwarfs in the row. There was one that was boost self by the number of dwarfs in the row. So why would you play this if you could play 2 of those, right? That was basically why this card stopped seeing play, but you're going to see it come back, I think, based on this right now. Now, Dennis Cranmer was one of those cards that I liked the idea of. I didn't think it was great. Now they're changing the power from 4 to 7, and they're buffing the provisions from 8 to 7, and the abilities boost adjacent units by the amount equal to their armor. Well, they just overtuned that card. So you look at this here. It was basically 4 power, and you'd often use it on melee, boost adjacent units by 2. So it was normally playing for 8 points for 8 provision. Right? That wasn't very good. This is ridiculous. This can get out of hand. And even if it doesn't, it's still 7 base power, right? So basically the floor of it was almost like the ceiling of this. Like it was up there. You know what I mean? So even if the card, like I'm thinking you run this under any circumstance if you're running dwarves in this coming patch. But we'll see. Now, Figus, power change from 5 to 7, ability change from, well, it's still defender. Order move self to the other row. So I think you're going to have this card more often than not in your dwarf deck because you have things that have resilience that you want to protect. You've got Brewer that you want to protect, and you've got just a lot of stuff happening in the back. You want to keep armor on things. You want to start to accumulate armor, right? So keep that in mind. Now, spawn Rowdy... We already talked about the Rowdy Dwarf and the row and defender, but the fact that it moves self to the other row on order is going to be very difficult, because if someone moves it, let's say with Frost, or they move it with some sort of tech like a Dragoon or something like that, because they want to get to what's behind it, now it's going to be able to move back. And that's kind of scary. Same thing applies if you're playing against like Guerrilla Tactics movement Scoia'tael, right? You're going to have it so that no one's going to be able to get to that Gezras. So that itself is pretty scary, right? Or you can move it with the Gezras and then use a leader charge to move it back the next turn, so you can like basically shield that Gezras every single turn so it does the max value. Pretty scary stuff. So Monroe, transform 1 allied Rowdy Dwarf into a Dwarf Berserker with 2 charges, yeah? So they split it up so it wasn't both on deploy, it was on order charge 2, and I liked that. So what they're doing to it now is number of charges from 2 to 3. That's pretty busted, no? You bring a token off the defender, you play Zoltan's Company, and you do whatever else, and then you get 3, literally, Berserkers coming off that. And the Berserkers are... I'll show you quickly here. Berserkers are these ones, right? Barricade at the end of your turn, damage self by 1, then damage random enemy unit by 1. It's this. So you're turning useless 2-point tokens into these bad boys. And they still have armor on them, which is getting this card boosted every turn, making it even more difficult to remove, right? And then you have cards that could put more armor on them to continue the damage pings on a turn basis. So we got Zoltan, Provision... Wow. They basically took dwarfs and said, okay, no one's playing this, let's make it meta. That's basically it. So Zoltan Chevet, Resilience, deploy, boost adjacent dwarves by 2. This card basically now plays for 6 on deploy. Yeah, I was right. 8 on deploy. It's got the armor there to make it hard to deal with, and then it's got resilience for the carryover, right? And if we have a defender down, they're not getting around this, so that makes it pretty difficult. And obviously, you know, you stack that with like a Gabor, you got 2 cards with resilience, even worse. Zoltan Warrior, provision change from... power change from 6 to 4. Provision cost change from 10 to 13. I know it's going to be a big change when I see the jump. Ability change to. Deploy damage 2 enemy units by 3. For each unit that survived, spawn a Rowdy Dwarf on the row. Barricade. At the end of your turn, damage a random enemy unit by 1. So you're doing 2 shots, essentially, of damage, and you're not looking to death blow. Right? You're looking just to keep them wounded. Then we get the Rowdy Dwarfs for each, which feeds into what we're doing with Monroe. Right? And then as long as this card has armor on it, at the end of your turn, damage a random enemy unit by 1. So, we'll pull it up for you guys. It's this one. That's kind of cool. So, what they've essentially done to this is they've added 6 damage to the card, right? 3x2. And then they added a barricade clause. It gives it more of a reason, basically, to play in your deck. They bumped it up to 13 provisions. That's really cool. It takes away this, though. You don't get the option to boost allied Rowdy Dwarfs by 2. Right? Interesting. I think that's actually pretty cool. I don't know if that's really overtuned, but it's gonna really be annoying if you keep armor on it, right? It's a 1 point per turn engine. Just in addition to all the other 1 point, 2 point per turn engines that the deck has going on right now, right? Then they just did another one. Zoltan's Company plays well with the Zoltan play. And this is why I was actually a little bit worried when I saw such a big buff to Zoltan, right? Bringing him down to 9 provisions. This card works even better. If you control Zoltan, give 1 armor to all dwarves on that row. Right? Think about that for a second. We're spawning 3 of them. We can flip all 3 of them. And then we're giving everything armor for 6 provision on the row, right? So, unbelievably overtuned. Dryad Grove Keeper. Whoops. So this is something that we haven't really been seeing played. It's been a very long time, maybe I would say like 2 years since I've really seen this card in play. Now, give an allied unit vitality with a duration equal to the number of allied dryads. So that's the issue, is getting enough dryads out there to make it work, right? But putting it now with bonded and having the deploy is kind of nice. So I don't like how it gets vitality itself, but I suppose at least it has the proactivity. Now, this is basically like the Mahakam card, except it's a Dryad tag. So instead of having, you know, the dwarfs 4 plus the 2 bonded, next one plus the 4, that's basically what it is. Same card design, identically. Dwarf Berserker, right? Another card with the dwarfs that's getting a buff. This one here, right? Okay, so there's... Wait, they're doing something to it. They buffed it too. So they... Wow. They took it from 5 to 4 and just reduced the armor by 1. That's a significant buff. Because there's no shortage of armor going around with this deck. Before you had to fight for it, but all the provisions are lowered, so everything's going to come together and fit so perfectly. And then we have the Skirmisher. I thought these were pretty cool cards before. Deploy and melee, damage an enemy unit by 3. If it survived, gain 1 armor. Okay. It was... Before it was boost self by 1. Order, barricade, damage an enemy unit by 3. So now it has an order if there's barricade. So, okay. So 1 base power, yeah. No, before it was boosted up by 2. Yeah, it was 1, then they buffed it to 2. So right now it's going to be 1 power and 1 armor. And the 3 damage, right? And then we get to do 3 more. So it's going to be basically 6 damage and the 1 base power, 7, and then it sits there with 1 armor, which will get it boosted by the Brewer and stuff like that. So it's a buff if you can keep him on the playing field, right? If you can give him armor so that you can use the order, very good card. If you can't, It's very vulnerable. It trades really well for removal because they just do 2 damage, get past that 1 armor, and that's that, right? And worst case, if you get a death blow, then you're sitting at 3 damage with 1 base power, and that's it. That's all you get, right? Actually, you still get the order, but then it's only 1 base power with no armor, right? So, something to think about. Mahakam, Marauder. So this is the card I was talking about before, that the Grove Keeper basically took its place. It's this card here, right? So what they're saying is that provisions change to 5, ability change to gain vitality for the duration equal to an allied unit's armor. So I guess you can choose. But if this has Barricade, boost health by the same amount instead. That's overtuned. Like, I say it in the nicest way possible, but I think like a lot of people are going to be running Yurden for the first week, because look at it this way, like you stack armor on something and then you just slam this down for like 10 points or more, you know, for 5 provision. It's going to be like maybe a 12-point play in a lot of cases, because it's boosting self by the amount of armor, and I think it's going to be pretty easy to stack 6-8 armor, right? And it has the 4 base power. So keep that in mind. Armor from the order ability changed from 2 to 4 on the minor. So this was a card basically that was kind of like an order boost by 2. These used to be very common, like in, I would say, maybe just before Master Mirror Gwent, or just around that time, like these kind of cards were common. So if it's a dwarf, give it 2 armor, they just enhance that, so now it's 4. So again, it kind of goes along what I'm saying. You play a couple minors, you give something a bunch of armor, like let's say a pyrotechnician that already has a couple armor. It'll have 2 plus 1 from the leader's 3. You give it 4 more, and then maybe you just say, forget about it, let's just stack it up again with another one, and you've got this huge amount of armor. You play a couple of the Marauders, and then you just basically click the Pyrotech, right? So that's kind of what we're going to see being abused, I think. Really powerful bronzes coming from dwarfs in this next patch. Rowdy Dwarf, armor change from 0 to 1. And just to make it even better, I guess you can't really see it from looking at it this way, but the 2-point token. Let's just leave it at that. That 2-point token that you get that normally doesn't have armor is now going to have 1 armor, right? Now, moving on to, I like how the Scoia'tael gets like a complete overhaul, and then Nilfgaard gets nothing. I guess that's fair. Nilfgaard's been sort of like the forefront of the meta for as long as I can remember at this point. We have double cross provision bonus change from 16 to 15. So guys, that's not a buff, that's a nerf, right? Bringing it down 1 provision means we might have to rework it even more. Couple months back, some cards were nerfed, and then, you know, double cross was actually recently nerfed to 16 provisions, and now it sees a second nerf. And I guess they're just really trying to deter people from playing the same Assimilate deck with Terra Nova and all that. That's been around for several seasons, you know, and I could tell you guys are getting sick of it too, because when I post this, it's not as popular. You know, you guys have seen it too many times. So seeing 15 provisions might actually make a difference, especially when you've got all these crazy changes, like these overtuned changes to Scoia'tael. So I'm looking forward to playing dwarfs, trying it out, but boy, is it gonna get pretty wild, pretty rowdy, right? We have Syndicate Pickpocket provision change from 7 to 8. That's not bad. I like this card. And if you guys are thinking what I'm thinking, this is support for lined pockets. Because what happens is Profit 7, you can make that 8 now, and then lined pockets, whenever you play a crime card, gain 1 coin, right? So if it's changed from 8, you have an empty bank, you can fill your bank with this 1 card, and you can bring out a boat. So oftentimes, you don't see a lot of Flying Redanians run in lined pockets, but now it might encourage taking that, which makes the deck a little bit better because you can easily thin it out. right? Having that come to the board, those points residual for every round, right? Just coming back. So I think Pickpocket Change is really good, right? Makes it worth the 6 provisions that it plays for. Bare Knuckle Brawler, yeah, they're doing exactly what I thought. So this card here, Intimidate Engine, I like to play it in line pockets. Has a new part of the ability. Now it's a spender, and I like that because in line pockets there aren't enough spenders. You have the drill, you've got maybe a Jacques if you throw one in there, you've got Cleaver, and you might have Freak Show. Freak Show just got a provision nerf, it's not as attractive. So now having extra spenders is kind of nice. Damage the highest power enemy by 1. Well, if you're putting bounty on the highest power enemy unit with like the Witchfinder, then you have a reason now to basically be able to tackle that down, which is kind of nice, right? It's always going to hit the card that you want it to hit, and we can recycle that bounty. So that's pretty cool. Crown Splitter Thug. What do we got here? So it's pretty cool. Like, I mean, back in the day, this used to like be fairly strong. I think it's a little power creep now. Intimidate, damage by 2, right? Basically at 3 base power, 5 provisions. There's definitely better cards to play in that range. Deploy ability change from 2 to 3 for the damage. So now it's playing for the 6 plus the engine, which makes it actually not as bad. I don't know if it's going to find its place there, but again, having that extra reach with 3 damage is actually pretty nice. And with the Intimidate tag, you know, it could be quite powerful. Eventide Plunder. We'll have to add an R on the end there. Something like that. So what they're saying is create a 4 provision cost unit with a fee. So you can spam these brawlers. Actually, that's kind of cool. You could spam the brawlers and then just get like more units with Intimidate on the board. Okay. I don't know if it's going to see a lot of play, because it seems like it's just as slow as playing one of these from hand, and I prefer to play one of these off of like Nilfgaardian Justice, for example. But it's not all bad. It doesn't have to be that either. This could be like a Sea Jackal. This could be a Street Urchin, right? So it has flexibility. I kind of like create and play cards quite a bit. I think they're fun. Especially when they're like 4 or 5 provision. They're not really a gamble. I don't play the expensive ones, but these are usually pretty useful, right? Payroll Specialist provision changed from 5 to 4. No longer has Intimidate. So if I'm not mistaken, this is the tribute and move a unit to the other row. Yeah, so they're basically making it so that if you're playing off the books, it would be free, but it's a movement tech. So a 5-point movement tech, which could actually see some play in this meta if you're looking to play Syndicate, because we know that there's going to be a lot of dwarfs going around for sure, and you obviously want to put Broover on a row that's pretty well empty. So pushing that back, if you can't remove that, is probably something you'd want to do. Playing into any sort of Kelly matchup, this could be quite useful. And there's definitely a few other situations maybe where you want to like cram their row, and you know, if they're looking to overswarm, you just make it happen so that they lose value there. So there's some applications for it. I think it would be more or less a tech card rather than a staple card, and it would be dependent on what you're running into, right? So they fixed some things with the journey contracts. I don't care all that much. At least we're getting compensated. Past abilities of off the books and hidden cash no longer become disabled when the leader abilities are reactivated by Damien Latour or Anna Henrietta. Okay. Stockpile is no longer unusable when both heroes are full. Okay, that's important. That's just a hot fix because it should still be usable but just not spawn the token. Melusine no longer increases her base power from a unit that was destroyed previously. I think that's reasonable. Salve Unity will now correctly react to specials from the opponent's side through Lydia. Okay, good. Siege Master will now correctly react to Siege Engine spawn and play through Adalia and Runestone. Again, something that should have happened in the past, right? So that's pretty much it for the patch notes, guys. 10.4 looks like a big season for dwarfs. Expect to see this in, I would say, like every second matchup for the next week. It looks like maybe even longer than a week. It could be all month, right? Because it's just that strong. Expect to see more swarm coming in from the, I think, Northern Realms, because there's a little bit of support for that here, and they've also done a little bit of swarm support for like Kikimora and the monster stuff. So I think it's going to be a very point slammy meta by the looks of it. However, you know, I think control always has its place, so we'll have to see how it shapes out. If you're looking to get back to pro quickly, it's looking like you probably want to go and play Scoia'tael, just based on what I see here. Now, some of my opinions might change a little bit once I see the new card reveals, which I'm about to go do in the next few minutes. But I'm just going based off of if the game remained the same right now, and these were the changes, what it would look like. And that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching the video, guys. We'll see you very shortly with my card reveal viewing for the first time. We'll go over it together. See you then.